Show me, Fabio, the soil.
So the topsoil layer completely burned, and we know that in the Boreal forest, normally around 50% of the carbon is stored into the soil. So we lost a lot of carbon here.
Where did it go?
It goes in the atmosphere.
It's being emitted into the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's going directly emitted in the atmosphere.
The hidden costs of a blazing summer, burned forests piling on to our climate crisis.
So this was part of the huge fire that we have this spring in Quebec.
Our guide is Fabio Generati, a forest science professor in Quebec.
And how severe was the fire here?
As you can see here, all the trees were killed by the fire. So it was a crown fire, meaning that the fire burned the branches, the upper branches of the trees. And in this case, was extremely high severe.
Remember June? The wildfires that raged through the boreal forest here sent that choking smoke to the city south, turning them red and hazy.
It was like 100 years of firefighting all at once.
An early sign of an unprecedented summer as massive fires threatened Canadian communities. But inside the forests, climate perils, huge ones.
The fire burned for about 20 days.
20 days?
Yeah.
Across the region, flames for 60 days, leaving graveyards of jack pine and spruce, only now with hints of green poking through. Normally in a forest, the growing trees take in carbon dioxide and through photosynthesis store the carbon for years, a huge hedge against rising greenhouse gas emissions. But this summer, the inferno released that carbon, making Canada the world leader in fire emissions. Europe's Copernicus program measures wildfires using satellite imagery. Here's the trend. The black line is the yearly average of carbon emissions from Canadian wildfires over 20 years. The red line is this year's, more than double.
I think the fact
Dr. Mark Parrington is a senior scientist.
3.5 months of non-stop fire emissions from Canada is quite stark that we're not seeing such a big signal from anywhere else around the Northern Hemisphere.
In British Columbia, Werner Kurtz, a senior research scientist at Natural Resources Canada, has been warning for decades about the rising intensity of wildfires.
It is an unprecedented, record-breaking fire season in Canada, across the country, almost twice the previous record.
Over 15 million hectares burned, releasing vast amounts of carbon.
We are now facing emissions in the order of 1.7 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That's over 2.5 times the emissions of all other sectors in the Canadian economy combined.
That means this year's fires gave off more CO2 equivalent emissions than all the cars fleeing them. In fact, more than all the annual emissions from cars, trucks, and industry in Canada combined.
As climate change continues to impact the length of the fire season, the drought conditions, fires will continue to increase. So it's not a new normal, it's a continuously worsening situation that we currently face.
The camera's rolling.
We put that to Environment and Climate Change Minister Stephen Guilbeault.
This year is by far the worst year in terms of forest fires in the history of Canada.
And scientists directly link the worsening wildfires to the warming climate. But most blazes are still considered natural disturbances, so they don't count in the official tally of greenhouse gas emissions that Canada or any other country reports to the UN.
These guidelines are ever evolving, and it's together globally that we decide on what are the best practices to report, to measure and report emissions.
The effectiveness of our greenhouse gas emission reduction targets is going up in smoke, literally. We basically need to have a global conversation who is technically accountable for these.
Back in the damaged forest in Quebec, all these dead trees will decompose. More swiftly because of these guys. Longhorn beetles, speeding up the decay. What you're hearing and seeing here is their larvae boring into the dead wood.
So that's the longhorn beetle
Yeah.
making sawdust.
Yes, making wood dust.
As the trees break down, they give off more carbon dioxide. That's a secondary impact of the summer's fires.
And will this forest now keep emitting this carbon for years?
Yes, exactly.
So this is no longer a carbon sink, as they call it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's beautiful in here.
Yeah, it's very beautiful.
After all that gloom in the dead forest, Generati takes us down the road to where the forest was spared. The fires jumped these patches, thankfully, leaving a green, spongy carpet, the undergrowth of a healthy boreal forest.
So we were talking about carbon in a healthy forest. Where is it?
This is like the littoral sphagnum and mosses, where most of the carbon is. And even if we go deeper into the soil and the organic material is more decomposed, the 40% of carbon is in this kind of material.
So in a healthy forest, this is the carbon storage.
Yes, this is carbon storage. So to accumulate all this material through time need a lot of years.
A lot of years for a forest to do its job, filtering our atmosphere. But snuffed out in weeks when the fires burned as fiercely as they did this summer.